So let's start. Our next session is a very special session because it usually does not happen with TEDx speakers. TED or TEDx speakers go on stage, deliver their up to 18 minutes talk, and then they leave the stage. And then you might have breaks to catch up on them and have conversation based upon the talk, whatever is inspiring you. This time we're going to have a session with 4 TEDx speakers for tomorrow with the Q&A. So you have the chance to immediately ask them questions after their short talk. So we're going to have like 20 plus 10 minutes for each speakers. So talking about Q&As, I would like to share with you 5 important rules of a Q&A.
Test.
And the first rule, a question starts with a why, when, how, who. Second rule, don't answer your question when you're giving a question already. People love to do this, so don't get affirmation of your question, of your answer to your own question while asking a question. This is not a question. The third rule seems to be a bit mean, but I have to share it with you. Make sure or try to look after, reflect yourself. Is the question important for you, or is it important for everybody in the room? Don't share your personal story when you begin with your question. It's about time, and if you have like 2 or 3 minutes sharing your life with the audience here before you start with the question, people might not be interested in your life story. I'm sorry for that. So keep the question short, which is actually the next rule. The 5th rule is, has your question been already asked by someone else? Rephrasing a question does not create a new question. And the 6th rule is actually the rule for the answer. As we want to see the questions short, we want to see the answers short, to get as much rotation as we can with the Q&A. That being said, we're ready to start with our first speaker, with our first TEDx speaker. Toby has delivered a TED Talk at TED Global in 2013. He spoke about innovation in Africa. Actually, he opened the eyes of 1.2 million people with his talk because it went through the ceiling with views online at TED.com. He's been writing about innovation, telecommunication, internet for 15 years. But what's very special with Toby, other than what he's going to share with us, is that he's a stage guru but not a stage geek. So give him a very warm applause to make him feel welcome. Thank you
very much. Thank you. Is the microphone working? Hello. So this is the talk I'm going to give tomorrow, which I'm not going to bore you by giving you today, and I'm going to do it much quicker and much faster tomorrow. But I was very lucky to be able to speak at TED last year, and it was my late father's proudest moment. But while I was thinking, when I got invited to speak here and they said, we'd like you to speak here, and I started thinking about things, and I thought, it's been quite amazing for me because I'm an introvert. I'm not a naturally outgoing person. I taught myself when I was 15 how to be not a shy person. If only I knew all you needed was 1 beer. Years of training, all I had to do was become a mild alcoholic. It would have been perfect. So I thought about it, and I thought, actually, it's not such a big thing in this day and age to be a TED talker. We live in a world where amazing people can say amazing things on TED, and journalists. I've had a bit of a useful career in journalism. That was the highlight of my professional career. When I was 25, my job was to follow Nelson Mandela when he was president. I know, I'm also embarrassed about that haircut, but it's too late now. And then I covered sport and politics and the transition to democracy. I got to interview the Dalai Lama when he came to South Africa. But when I was thinking about the way of the world and the world we live in now, and my theory is anybody can do anything. The power of the internet, the power of cloud computing, the communication mechanism that allows any person to speak to anyone else in the world through the internet, through blogging, through Twitter. It's really quite profound. So anybody can do anything. But I thought about it, and I thought, actually, in another age, it was much harder to get anywhere. My grandfather was a poor Polish tailor living in Paris. He met my grandmother, and all he ever wanted to do was be a sculptor. That's him on the right, and that is President Truman on the left. And my grandfather wanted to be a sculptor, moved to South Africa because that's where you could get a visa, and through his career he did busts, which I suppose were kind of selfies of their day, right? You know, like everyone had a bust. So he did Truman, he did the current Queen Elizabeth, Charles de Gaulle, and while I was researching this for this trip, I discovered that he did a bust of another famous Indian with a South African connection. I had no idea my grandfather did a bust of Gandhi, who is the very epitome of anybody can do anything. I know, you know, I follow the news. Anyone can be anyone. A cricket fan can run Microsoft. You know, anybody can do anything. I've seen Slumdog Millionaire. So in case you haven't noticed, Africa is in the middle of this incredible boom, and it's a boom of many proportions. It is an economic boom because of the growth of our environment. And it's an interesting graphic, this one, which just shows you, I mean, you know, I can't quite read, I can't see where India is. Right, there you go, there it is, the orange. I mean, you know, India fits into East Africa, China fits into Southern Africa, America fits into West Africa. The size of the African continent is massive. We're a member of the BRICS organization, which of course India is as well. I mean, I always say we're the apostrophe S in lowercase. I think that's it, you get it. I think it's really funny, actually. And what's happened is that the growth of the continent has been so explosive. 6 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world have been in Africa. But it's a bit of a misnomer because it's actually minerals and resources. It isn't broad-based economic upliftment. But I don't think that's going to be very different. Whenever you talk about Africa, it's de rigueur to look at this picture of Africa from space, or the world from space. Beautiful picture of the planet as it is. But what's really quite useful is that this isn't just a picture, it's a map of innovation. And it's very easy to understand how the innovation works. Wherever there's electricity, there's no innovation, except perhaps India. India has good electricity, but there's still rampant innovation. And why? Because when people have got electricity, they do the things you can do when you have electricity, like watch the cricket, you know, play Angry Birds, you know. No one thinks, I'll stop watching the cricket and go and invent something to give my village power at night, do they? So you see the most innovative stuff, real innovation. Not, you know, the word innovation has been overused by everybody. It's been used as a way to repackage financial packages, you know. That's not innovation, that's rebranding. And we live in this world of incremental upgrades. That's also not innovation. Real innovation, to my mind, is solving problems. And Africa, like India, has an abundance of real problems, problems that are really significant that we have to solve. And what I was saying last year is that because Africa is solving these incredibly important and difficult problems, the way we solve them means that everybody can use them around the world. And we are solving the problems for the rest of the world. And we're doing it in the most remarkable of ways. If you've never heard of this remarkable guy called William Kamkwamba, who lived in Malawi. His parents couldn't afford to send him to school, and he went to a library. Anyone remember those? It's like what we used to do before Wikipedia. Thank you. And he went to this library, and he found out how to make a windmill. He found out how to make a windmill from a book. Remember those things? Hey? And he created this windmill, and his life story is very aptly summed up. He spoke at TED, obviously, and his life story is summed up in a book called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. And last I heard, he was studying at an Ivy League university, and he's going back to Malawi to run a $60 million project with wind turbines, which is really significant. Another famous person you've probably heard of is Elon Musk. And because the world is like 6 degrees of separation, his uncle is my doctor. You know, speaking of which, I met Kevin Bacon earlier this year. and shook his hand. So that makes you all bacon number 2s, right? You know, I'm kind of grew up Jewish, so I don't know how kosher that is. You know, you guys feel the same here in India. So anyway, he has done more to revolutionize the world than anyone else. And he comes from this funny little town in South Africa called Pretoria, which is our capital. Anyone who's been to South Africa will tell you if you've lived in Pretoria for 2 decades, it doesn't get out of your system. So as much as Elon Musk says it was only because he lived in California that he was able to innovate the way he does, it's in his blood, right? This is a really fantastic story, you know, and it's a great example of how local people don't see the big picture. You know, it always seems to be outside that people see amazing pictures. And this guy, Siyabonga Musa, is a young guy who wanted to invent his own rocket fuel. You know, spent his childhood doing it. He eventually got a scholarship to go to Harvard. He invented the rocket fuel. He's now found a very clever solution for fuel cells. I don't know if you know what these are. They're little, it's basically like a methane thing that will charge your battery for your cell phone. Amazing how much of our consciousness and the world's enterprises go into things like cell phone batteries, right? Speaking of which, I mean, whose iPhone ever makes it to lunchtime? Anyone? You know, who has an iPhone, by the way? The show of hands. Who's got an iPhone? Yeah? Who's got an Android phone? Who's got a BlackBerry? Who will admit in public they have a BlackBerry? Because, you know, the smartphone of Africa, as I'm going to tell you in a moment, is a phone like this. It's a feature phone, really basic feature phone. Costs $150. No, $15, 150 Rand. Costs $15, has got 35 days battery life. Okay? But we'll talk about that in a second. We're also very good at getting people into space. You know, the thing about Mark Shuttleworth that I actually thought about this yesterday. If you stop for a moment and think, the world of computers is dominated by 2 companies, Microsoft and Apple. They produce the operating systems in the world. No one has been able to dent their market share, not even Shuttleworth. But Shuttleworth is the only person who's been able to form another ecosystem. Ubuntu, his operating system for Linux, is used by everybody. If you've ever used Google Search, you've used Ubuntu. All from Africa. And you know, as you've probably already heard, probably the greatest success story of African innovation is this remarkable product called M-Pesa. And what M-Pesa does, I took this picture just outside Nairobi. I mean, I love this. I was speaking to some banks recently and I said to them, you guys are in a lot of trouble. You're going to be disintermediated. You really are. I mean, banks have got to be scared. I mean, you can go here, you can get your SIM card, you can send money across the world, and you can have your hair done, you know. And M-Pesa is remarkably simple, as you can see. You know, this is a guy in Dar es Salaam. You can send money to anybody. You can do anything with it. It is so remarkably brilliant. I mean, I don't know how many people have been following the scandal with Apple Pay. You know, every Apple launch follows the Apple products don't work, followed by the quick software update, followed by everybody who won't use it and why. And right now, Walmart refuses to use Apple's system. I mean, I just laugh at that. For the last 10 years, we have been able to do sophisticated things with mobile devices that the most sophisticated economies in the world, America, Europe, Asia, haven't caught up with. Somebody living in a rural area in Kenya can do more than you can in the so-called first world. And $29 million a day, 40% of Kenya's GDP passes through M-Pesa every day. It's really, really significant. You can do everything with it. Pay your groceries, your school fees. Somebody told me customs officials wanted them to bribe them with it. You know. And what's so great, this is African ingenuity at its absolute. Someone was catching a trip in Nairobi from the airport and a beggar knocked on the window and said, give me some money, please. And the guy said, I've got no money. And he went, M-Pesa. So, you know, some of the great success stories are Amazon, eBay, online shopping, e-commerce. We all know, like mobile money, everything is going to shift to mobile phones ultimately. I mean, who doesn't do 80% of the email on their phone, right? You know. So what these guys in Nigeria do is really brilliant. They do cash on delivery. You do it all through a cell phone. You order your product and they deliver it to you. But what's so truly remarkable, has anyone been to Lagos? Anyone? Yeah? You'll understand what I mean. These guys can deliver it to you anywhere in Lagos in 40 minutes. It's kind of like saying they can deliver anything in Mumbai in 40 minutes, right? Great traffic, by the way. So it's a really innovative way of getting around the problem. The problem is no one trusts anyone else, even in Nigeria. Nigerians also get ripped off by 419. And 419 is actually from the postal code. That's how long they've been, siphoning money. In fact, if you want anything delivered in space, you should ask an African. I come from Johannesburg, which is a mining town. It's only just over 100 years old. But I don't believe the gold of today is under the ground. I think the gold of today is us, the people. We're the people. And the other gold is mobile. Mobile is like a kind of railroad. If you look at how the railroad, India is a very good example. The railroad in India or in America, once you had the railroad, you had all the associated industries around it. You needed coal and steel, water and wood for the steam engines. Then you had, somewhere for the guys who looked after it to stay. Then, amazingly enough, you had in South Africa, we call them a spaza shop. It's like a general trader. And very quickly, like, the online world, the porn industry arrived by way of brothels. But it's not these kinds of phones. It's not this kind of large screened monster smartphone like the iPhone, who got the 6 or the 6 Plus. I'm having this conversation with people. I keep saying to them, yeah, well done. I say to them, I know I edit a gadget magazine, but actually, it's just a tool. It's not devices like this. It is devices like too many pockets. It's devices like this, which have 4 features that are really remarkable. By the way, talking about incremental upgrades, can anybody tell that these phones are any different from last year's phones? That's the Samsung, that's the iPhone. Hey, there's a free iPhone for anyone who can tell me the difference. Just kidding. Second prize is 2. This phone has all of the features that make it remarkable for an emerging market, Africa or India or Russia or China. It's really cheap, $15. I know that's not so cheap, but it's still cheaper than a $1,000 or a $500 iPhone. It's got 35 days battery life, and it's got a built-in radio, and it's got a built-in torch. So it is exactly what you need to communicate. And with it, you can do remarkable things from anywhere. Like I said, you can use M-Pesa. This woman could be replying to an SMS. She could be getting a weather report from a service provider telling her what's going to happen. Or she could be paying her kids' school fees at university. There are multiple things that you can do with these devices. They may be dumb phones, but the services around them are really remarkable. And why this is important is because the next billion or so people, are not going to use a big, colorful smartphone. They're going to use a device like this, or they're going to use, when it eventually arrives, the, $50 or $25 smartphone. And the kinds of things that you can do with it are, as I said, amazing. So I'm going to just run through a quick few examples of what people are doing with these basic phones and how revolutionary they are. Because, Silicon Valley will look at something and go, okay, well, we need a yo. Is there anything more puerile in the world than sending someone a yo? Yo. I pushed it twice. Yo. Really, that's what people think is innovation. You know how much funding they got? Okay, Uber. I think Uber's a, disruptive technology. It's another word I hate, disruptive, But the World Bank has this interesting figure that says for every 10% of broadband penetration, you get a 1.38% growth of the country's GDP. And you've seen that in India. The IT boom of the last 10 or 15 years has transformed Bangalore from, somewhere that makes good curry to somewhere where you can get the best engineers in the world. It's really quite remarkable. But it's not for sissies. And it's this pioneering attitude that I believe the emerging market mindset brings to the world. You have problems, you have to solve them. No one's going to solve them for you, so you do. That is the kind of innovation that I find incredible and fascinating. And I've been astounded at the examples that I've seen in India about what you can do with it. And I'll run through some of those tomorrow. I won't bore you by giving my talk tomorrow, which I hope is going to be funnier than today. I never thought I was funny, by the way. I've only discovered I was funny in the last few years. I mean, I always thought I was funny. I mean, I used to laugh at my jokes all the time, and then recently everyone else started laughing at my jokes, and believe me, no one is more surprised than me. Anyway, the revenge of the nerds, you know, the geek will inherit the earth, you know, as we say in South Africa, Amandla. So devices like this are remarkable, simply because there are remarkable things you can do with them. But there's another reason Africa is of prime interest to the world, and the reason is that China has boomed, India is busy booming. Where Africa is at the position China was when its boom years began. And the reason is we have a growing market. Of the billion people that live on the continent, 66% are under the age of 30, which means we have the population dividend, as economists or sociologists call it, the surge of young people with energy and interest who want to work, who got to find a job. And it's incumbent, I suppose, on us older people to find something for them to do and something for them to educate. I mean, there's some remarkable stories of education. But don't believe my word, believe Barack Obama, because at the end of the day of this graph, the most specific, I think, is this one, which is the middle class. Why does everyone like the middle class? Because we buy shit. We are the people who pay the taxes, and we are the people who buy the iPhones and the Samsung phones and everything else. That's what is so significant. So at the moment, the middle class in Africa is about 33% of the 31% population, 314 million people, and of course people buy things, which, you know, if you don't believe me, believe Mr. Obama. He came to Africa last year and spoke about the importance of, you know, finding people to buy iPods and airplanes. This is a mobile innovation epicenter of the world, or Lagos. Why? Because people have got nothing to lose. And I mean, I could have taken a picture of Delhi outside the window and said something very similar, because I've seen people doing clever stuff here. Here's a couple of good examples of what you can do and how you can do it. I didn't know this, but Ghana and parts of West Africa are massive, massive rice producers. There's a guy, it's a farmer in Ghana, but there's a guy who runs a business who deals with 2,000 small-scale farmers using phones like this. And basically, he's found a way to create a kind of supply chain by communicating with these farmers. How's your crop? What have you got? What's your yield? What are you going to do? Basic information. But if you're running a business with 2,000 suppliers, that's the kind of information you need. And I stopped and I thought, you know, Africa has been the source of minerals for Europe and the West for however long. Why is Africa not the world's bread basket, you know, or rice basket, you know? What's the equivalent of a rice basket for a bread basket? I don't know. Sushi rolls. Africa is the source of, you know, sushi. You see pictures like this all over in Africa. People love to take them because of our dramatic sunsets, you know. The worse the pollution, as you know, the more dramatic the sunset. So we have dramatic sunsets in open places. These power lines are dotted all over your country, my country, the whole of Africa. Why doesn't it look like that? Why is Africa not the source of the world's power? Solar power, you know, is really remarkable. It's the other great gamble or investment that Elon Musk has made. And just as a quick aside, what fascinates me about the way he's done his business is he comes from the Silicon Valley mindset, the startup mindset, where you put lots of money into a project, lots of money, and you hope and pray for several years that the investment will come through. So people who come from that kind of startup background have a much higher risk profile than anyone else. You know, a bank wouldn't fund that. There's no way. No one. So what he's done is he's played a really long game with a whole bunch of his investments. And Solar City, which is his big thing in the States, is brilliant. People can't afford to put solar panels on their roofs. I just bought a house. It's, you know, $10,000, $20,000. You know, got to pay the bond down a little bit before we put that on. But most people just can't afford it, and it should pays itself off in 3 or 4 years in South Africa because of the cost of electricity. It'll be less. So what he does is he puts the panels on people's roofs. He gives them as much electricity as they need within limits, and then the rest of it he owns and he sells back into the grid. It's genius. Why isn't someone in India doing it, right? I mean, you guys have got lots of sun. You've certainly got a lot of humidity, I can tell you about that. And the things you can do are really simple. You don't have to have a fancy schmancy house. You can live in a straw hut and have that kind of access, or this kind of thing. In South Africa, I love this. There's a glass company called Consol. They make these glass bottles, but what they started doing is adding a little solar panel on the top, a couple of little batteries, and a few LED lights. Leave that in the sun all day, generates power. There's a little, see this little clip on the top? You put that flat, and it turns on the light as it is. That is the most profoundly simple way to give people light at night that they've never seen. And these kind of installations of solar panels are not just the solar panel. It becomes a little bit of a business, because what people do is they charge their own, they have electricity for themselves. Their kids can study at night. I'm going to get to paraffin stoves in a second. They don't have to use paraffin stoves, and they are able to charge their cell phones. But what they can also do is let other people in the village charge their cell phones, for whom they pay a small amount of money. And I understand a lot of you are business people, so you'll understand the innovation at the business level that's so significant here. A lot of these systems, and they're different components. There's a brilliant one that is a torch. It's got 3 different parts. It's got the light at the end, the battery in the middle, and the little solar thing at the top. And what people do is buy it off over time, small incremental amounts of money. Why do people still use kerosene and paraffin? I understand in India it's as much of a problem as it is in Africa. The stoves explode, people get burnt. There's a lot of pain and suffering. Why? Because you can buy kerosene in small amounts. And that is what something like solar power, or these solar power initiatives, will change, that you can buy it off in small amounts. Just by the way, the most exciting thing happening in the world right now, in the world of physics and the way we understand the universe, is happening in Africa. It's called the Small Kilometer Array, and it's a whole bunch of these satellite dishes that are pointed far, far into deep space and telling us what's going on. So it really is the most profound scientific experiment in the world to discover the universe we live in, and it's happening in the global south. So that's pretty much my talk. But I always remember this guy. His name's Steve Sassoon. I love him, and he was the guy who invented the digital camera in 1975. Do you know who he worked for? Kodak. So Steve Jobs was right. It's the best piece of business advice. But my favorite thing about this incredible looking camera is not Steve's dashing smile. It's the fact that in 1975, the storage medium of the time was not a USB stick. It was a cassette tape. Okay, I love that more than you do. Anyway, I think that's really great. So just to conclude, a few years ago, I went through some rough patches, and a friend of mine who's the CEO of a big company sent me this little diagram to remind me what success really looks like. It was by a guy called The Gaping Void, at Gaping Void on internet. He's a really remarkable guy. And then a few months later, after he sent it to me, he had a fallout with his board who fired him, so I sent it back to him. That's the way of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that beautiful journey, for the talk. So we'll start with the Q&A. I might want to kick off the Q&A with a question that I'm interested to hear your answer with, because I did a Twitter handle on Thursday, so there were 2 hours open for Q&As to me. People were asking me about whatever, and many of the questions, or most of the questions, were about entrepreneurships and leadership, and what makes a good entrepreneur and what makes a good leader. And it turned out to be that most of the people didn't dare. They had this anxiety of failing, of starting. So I guess there's some similarity.
Well, I think fear of failure is probably the biggest thing that prevents people from doing something. Fear of, what happens if I fail and I get embarrassed by it? Is this still working? Better. Okay. Indeed it is. You haven't been able to hear me all this time. Lucky you. So fear of failure, I think, is a big thing. I print and edit and publish a gadget magazine called Stuff. I know there's a copy here in in India, and it's actually, come to think of it, it's a franchise. And if you think about franchising, KFC, McDonald's, franchising is one of the great economic business models around the world. Who uses pay-as-you-go? Or who knows people who use pay-as-you-go? And you know that pay-as-you-go is 80% of the world's cell phone use, and that, by the way, was invented in Africa. But I've looked at my business and realized that I publish a piece of paper, and in 5 years' time, no one's going to read paper. They're going to read digital. So I've looked at the kind of changes that need to happen. And Jerry and I were chatting about this actually on the way here, and I said to him, I find the biggest resistance in the companies that I go to speak to people about how to be nimble, how to think like a disruptive small company. The problem is that people are sentimental. They're habitual. They've done it the same way over and over. Why should we do any different? Not only are they change resistance, but there's a kind of sentimentality of like, I like the way I do things. Why should I change? So that's the first part that people have to get over: the fear and then the sentimentality.
Questions from your side? Hands up. Keep the question short.
This is regarding the Chinese products which are in Indian market. Similarly, there is an influx of Chinese products in the African market. So how does that affect the innovation of small entrepreneurs and innovators?
It's a very good point, and I actually had a slide that I dropped, but I'm going to use tomorrow about an unknown brand called Techno, which is huge in Africa, and I think this is the way of the world. What's going to happen is that people go through cycles of business. If you look at the world now, Apple and Samsung are at the top of the pile. Samsung's revenue has been declining for the last 4 quarters. They're selling less and less smartphones because nobody is buying a top-end luxury smartphone when they can buy the same thing from Huawei. Huawei's P7, let me tell you, is as good as any other top brand phone. It's just, a couple of $100 cheaper, and it's a lesser known brand. I think that Microsoft's killing off the Nokia brand. They're killing off the mid to low range phones. This beautiful phone I love so much, the 105. All of these bottom end phones. Nokia still owns 40% of the market in Africa, and I know that the Asher range of phones is hugely popular here. It's kind of like a mid-range smartphone. So what's going to happen is when that vacuum starts to emerge in the next 18 months, it's probably the biggest land rush or opportunity for the mobile market ever. Suddenly there's going to be no more Nokia, and I think the companies that are going to fill it are Xiaomi, Huawei, ZTE. I think it's inevitable. I think that cell phone market, certainly at the bottom end like here and to the mid end, has gone the way of every other manufacturing industry in the world. It's going to be manufactured cheaply either in China or India. Qualcomm, Qualcomm are the Intel of the day, where they make the chips that go in here. They give people the plans to make phones. Why? Because they want to build more phones and sell them. Does that answer your question? Should we chat afterwards? Okay. Hello.
Hi, I'm Riganka from Dasra. I also spent 8 months at WIT, so I love Josie.
Amandla.
Yes. My question to you is, you're talking about mobile phone innovation, and mobiles are fairly ubiquitous. But if you move away from mobiles, what works in a Lagos and a Dar es Salaam and a Joburg is very different because it's context specific. So could you also talk a little bit to how you can scale up that innovation? Across.
Are you talking services?
Right.
Yeah.
Across different African countries, but also, people talk about similarities between Africa and India, and how do you sort of move beyond that context-specific innovation to make it scalable?
I could talk about this for an hour because I get the point you're making. I mean, there is, firstly, cultural differences, language differences, localization differences. I mean, we all do the same thing, don't we? We all go online, we check Facebook, we check our bank balance, we stay in touch with WhatsApp, or we communicate by SMS. We're all kind of doing the same services. I really laugh at this internet.org initiative being run by Facebook. It's fantastic. People get free access to internet essential services on their phone. But because it's being run and funded by Facebook, Facebook is now considered an essential service, right? Which actually it is. Come to think of it, like I do lots of secret shopping and ask people what they use and where and how and what do you do. And I often say to people in feature phones, like, are you on the internet? And they go, no. And I go, are you on Facebook? And they go, like, duh. Hello.
Hi. So I have a question based on the talk we heard this morning, and I don't know if you were here, but it was about potential of women in India. Now, I know personally of a few women in Africa because I've had the chance to visit several countries who've come up with some really interesting innovations. And much of what you said was a lot of what men
I have to share a little personal detail. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. I have a very powerful Jewish mother. The 3 kids above me are all women. I learned from an early age, thank God, that the world is run by women. I feel like I'm Neo in the Matrix. Like everyone else sees the woman in the red dress, I see the code. I see the agent, and the agent looks like my mother with sunglasses and a shoe. She got really angry. She threw a shoe at us, so she's like,
So, well, that's...
Yeah, they're amazing innovations.
Quite.
And a guy like
and
Bunker
I was
Roy.
just wondering if, if you know of any interesting stories, you could always share them, but how easy or difficult is it for them to put it out there if they've got this interesting idea and then, put it around their community or village or town or whatever?
I think we live in an age where any good idea or any good initiative gets a lot of publicity. If you want afterwards, I know lots and lots and lots of examples. And a place like Kenya has the most vibrant IT startup culture in Africa, in Nairobi, based in a place called the iHub. I mean, they're doing remarkable things. There's a woman called Juliana Rorich who was part of the Ushahidi team. So is Orly Orke. There are lots of powerful, amazing women doing incredible things. So I've got lots of examples. I've seen great things where young women with a bit of technical savvy want to help women working in a market sell their beads and goods and tourist trinkets, and they've come up with great solutions. It's really a great combination between the young savvy woman and the older less savvy woman. But someone like Bunker Roy with his Barefoot College, which I'm going to talk about tomorrow, and I'll throw away my punchline today, but I just love this guy. I love he looked at the problem and he found the solution, which is the young men leave the village because that's the way of men. Men are mobile, as he says, wherein the people who stay in the village and don't go are the grandmothers. I just love that. My mother was 74 when she got her first computer, and around her experience with them, she was born in 1928. She went to school. They sat under a tree and wrote on a slate with a piece of chalk. Now she uses an iPad, FaceTime. She plays words with friends with my sister in the States. And I said to him, you can't. It's not true that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You just have to teach them 10 times, and be really patient. Yes.
Hi. Today during your talk, you had mentioned the success of M-Pesa,
yes,
as well as you mentioned the resistance to change.
Yes.
So how did M-Pesa initially change people's behavior, and how did people trust and move from cash to mobile?
Well, it was a difficult transition. Let's be true. I mean, there's been a lot of resistance to that kind of stuff because, of course, people are afraid they'll lose their money. But it started off in a very small scale. You could do small things. M-Pesa's into its second or third wave now, where there's much more trust. There's much more. It used to be person-to-person payments basically, but there are a whole bunch of very clever startups. Coco is one of them. They're helping merchants become online, get online. In South Africa, there's an incredibly smart man who just happens to be a Singh, Herman Singh, who's running the M-Pesa for Vodacom South Africa, who's just a genius, really. He's an unbelievably smart guy. So incredible things going to happen. But the reason people had to adopt it, this is the innovation out of necessity aspect, is that there is no alternative. There's no other way, Thank God Africa has problems because of those problems. We've come up with great solutions like M-Pesa or Ushahidi, or as I'll show tomorrow, this amazing thing from the guys from Ushahidi called the brick.
Yeah.
2 more questions.
I have one question. In the beginning, you said lights are where you can't do much, and that's where you show the lights with
Yes.
America and no lights in Africa, right?
Yes.
How do you differentiate between discovery and invention and innovation? That's what you say for Africa,
Oh,
and
yeah.
how do you say the three words applicable to Africa?
This is something I'm very interested in. I always used to read books about scientific discovery, and there is a difference between discovery and invention and innovation. I define innovation as solving a problem. Innovation generally involves one or two other things that finding a new way to do things, or an old way, and reinventing it is not that. It's finding a new kind of thing. So, I mean, it's a matter of very, I don't think I've got time to answer this, but if you want to afterwards, I could speak for a couple of hours on this. I'm completely fascinated about, if you look at the 19th century and the history of the 19th century, every year, there's not one, but there's like 5 incredible things that happened, like the invention of the light bulb, or electricity, or this or that. And that was just us discovering our world. Now that we know so much of our world, what do we do with it? And that's the thing, do we define space travel as innovation? Is what Elon Musk doing innovation? Yes, it is, as I'll explain tomorrow. I'm not going to give it away.
One more question.
Hello.
Hi. Has there been any innovation or breakthrough in mobile technology which can help penetrate education?
Oh, so much, really. There's a remarkable stuff that people are doing, and the uptake of the youth is quite something. So firstly, let's just talk about SMS. SMS is a remarkable technology, the best communication technology in the world, better than email, better than everything. Why? Because everybody can get it on their devices, and it has 100% read rate. 100% read rate. So if your kids are not replying to you, it's not because they didn't get the message, it's because they don't want to reply. The things you can do are fascinating. You know that there's a kind of underlying layer to the cell phone network called USSD, Universal Service Whatever. And using USSD, that's what M-Pesa uses and banks use. And so it's this underlying layer that you can actually communicate with the phone, and you can do incredible stuff. There's a company in South Africa called Native that's come up with an app called Book.ly, Book.ly, and they found a way to put books on basic phones. There's a guy in South Africa who made a waterless, like a hand cleaner, but you could use it over your whole body. He wrote his 40-page A4 business plan on one of those clunky old Nokias with his thumb. They're amazing education initiatives, especially around maths and science. Nokia runs quite a remarkable program in Kenya where you get tests and revisions and whatever. And my experience of the youth and technology is they are filled with curiosity. They will use the communication medium that they are most comfortable with. I'm 43. What did I grow up with? Writing on a piece of paper. When I finished university, because we were journalists, we were the only ones who learned to type. Everybody types now. The range of where people have moved from in terms of what they can do with the technology. So the youth are ready and able, and they're fantastic examples. There's a great thing called edX that's doing some great stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Big hand of applause. Toby, thank you so much.